The year was 1869. Only 4 years had passed since the Civil War, the most devastating conflict in American history. The United States was rebuilding. The nation's wounds were still fresh, but its youth were restless. They filled lecture halls, study rooms, and dormitories, eager to redefine what it meant to be American, in spirit and in strength. Two colleges stood just miles apart in New Jersey: Rutgers College in New Brunswick and the College of New Jersey, soon to be known as Princeton. Both proud, both ambitious, both filled with young men who wanted to test themselves, not on the battlefield, but on the field of play. At the time, sports in America were still taking shape. Baseball had begun to spread across the country. Rowing was thriving at Harvard and Yale. But another game was forming, rougher, faster, and unlike anything the nation had seen before. It wasn't rugby, it wasn't soccer. It was something in between, and it was about to become football. On October 20th, 1869, a simple letter was sent from Rutgers to Princeton. It was a challenge to meet and play a game called football. The word meant something different back then. Each college had its own rules: part rugby, part soccer, and mostly chaos. Rutgers captain William J. Leggett and Princeton's William S. Gummer agreed to a set of compromises. 25 players per side, a round ball, not oval, no carrying, no throwing, only kicking and striking with open hands. And the first team to score 6 goals would win. Princeton accepted. The date was set: Saturday, November 6th, 1869. A new rivalry was born. That crisp November afternoon, the campus of Rutgers came alive. Behind the main college buildings, a rough patch of grass had been cleared, uneven, sloped, with no boundary lines and no stands. Spectators gathered along the edges: professors, students, and townspeople, their breath visible in the cold air. There were no uniforms, only caps and turbans to tell the sides apart. Rutgers wore scarlet headbands tied from strips of red cloth. Princeton wore orange and black caps, colors that would one day become iconic. No referees, no whistles, only 2 umpires, one from each school, to settle disputes. And on that imperfect field, the first organized game of American football was about to begin. At 3 o'clock, the ball was placed at midfield, a round leather sphere, more suited for soccer than football. The captains stepped forward. The crowd fell silent, and then the whistle blew. Instantly, both sides charged, 50 men rushing toward the center, shouting, colliding, and scrambling for the ball. No passing, no downs, just a furious, kicking melee. The ball bounced unpredictably, ricocheting off legs, knees, and shoulders. Players dove into the fray, forming chaotic mounds of bodies. The sound was primal: boots thudding, voices echoing, grass tearing. Moments later, Rutgers struck first, a quick series of kicks, and the ball crossed the goal. 1-0. Rutgers. Cheers erupted. History had been made. The first goal in American football. But Princeton wasn't finished. They struck back quickly. 1-1. The crowd roared, the pace quickened, and the game descended into beautiful, organized chaos. There were no helmets, no coaches, no huddles, only instinct, teamwork, and determination. Each time the ball changed possession, the entire field surged like a living wave. Players kicked, blocked, and tackled, forming and breaking clusters of motion. By halftime, Rutgers led 4-2, their smaller, faster players using clever teamwork to outmaneuver Princeton's taller men. Spectators could hardly believe what they were watching. This wasn't just play, it was endurance, strategy, and spirit. It was something new. In the second half, Princeton gathered themselves. Their captain, William Gummer, called for discipline. No more wild chasing, play smart, stay organized. It worked, for a time. Princeton closed the gap, making the score 5-4. The energy surged. Each team was exhausted, yet refused to yield. Every kick now carried the weight of victory. Every collision drew gasps from the crowd. The field was littered with sweat, mud, and pride. And then came the deciding moment. Rutgers pressed forward in one final surge. The ball rolled deep into Princeton's half. Scarlet-clad players chased it down. A wild scramble, a kick, a deflection, and suddenly the ball sailed through the goal. Goal. Rutgers. 6-4. The game was over. The players collapsed, gasping, laughing, shaking hands. Rutgers had won the first intercollegiate football game in history. The crowd rushed the field. Students cheered, hoisted their heroes on their shoulders, and carried them in celebration through the campus streets of New Brunswick. And though no one knew it then, a national tradition had just begun. A week later, on November 13th, Rutgers traveled to Princeton for the rematch. This time, Princeton had home advantage and adjusted the rules slightly in their favor. Rutgers agreed, in the spirit of sportsmanship. The result was decisive. Princeton won 8-0. The series stood tied, one victory each. A third game was planned, but canceled due to upcoming exams. Even then, academics took priority. Still, those two contests were enough. Other universities noticed: Columbia, Yale, Harvard. And soon a new movement had begun. By the early 1870s, football spread across the Northeast, but every school played differently. Some favored soccer-style rules, others leaned toward rugby. The turning point came in 1874, when Harvard played McGill University of Montreal. McGill's players used the rugby code, a version that allowed running with the ball and tackling. Harvard students loved it. They adopted it, refined it, and began playing it against American colleges. Within a decade, the rugby version became dominant, and from that foundation, a new American game was born. Then came Walter Camp, a Yale player with a mind for innovation. Between 1880 and 1883, Camp introduced revolutionary changes. The line of scrimmage, the snap, the system of downs, and teams reduced from 25 players to 11. He transformed chaos into structure and rugby into American football. No longer a kicking match, but a tactical battle of territory, timing, and control. The sport began to look and feel like what we know today. In 1869, the first game drew little national attention. Only Rutgers' student paper, the Targum, recorded the event. Their report described enthusiastic shouting and scientific kicking, a proud yet modest account of what was, unknowingly, history in the making. As decades passed, newspapers across the nation began covering football regularly. By the 1880s, major papers printed play-by-play accounts. By the 1890s, college football games filled entire stadiums. The humble match between Rutgers and Princeton had become the foundation of a national spectacle. But with fame came danger. Football was brutal. Players wore little protection. Broken bones, concussions, and even deaths were reported. By 1905, public concern reached the White House. President Theodore Roosevelt summoned college officials and demanded reform. Out of that meeting came a new organization, the Intercollegiate Athletic Association, which would become the NCAA. Rules changed, safety improved, and the forward pass, once illegal, was finally allowed. The modern era of football began. A century later, in 1969, Rutgers and Princeton reunited to commemorate the 100th anniversary of that first match. On Rutgers' campus, players wore replicas of the original uniforms, scarlet turbans and orange caps, and reenacted the 1869 game using the same strange rules. It was a celebration of history, humility, and tradition, a reminder that from the simplest beginnings, greatness can grow. Today, a plaque near the original field in New Brunswick honors that game. It reads, "Birthplace of College Football." From that small field in New Jersey, football spread everywhere. By the early 1900s, college games drew tens of thousands of fans. Radio brought their voices into homes. Television made them icons. And in 1920, the professional version, the National Football League, was born. What began as a student pastime had become a defining part of American culture, a story of teamwork, rivalry, and unyielding spirit. Picture it one last time. A cold November sky, two schools, 50 students, one round ball, no helmets, no rules set in stone, just pride, passion, and a challenge between rivals. When that whistle blew on November 6th, 1869, a new American tradition was born. From that muddy field in New Brunswick came the echoes that would shape generations. From the Ivy League to the Super Bowl, the first college football game wasn't just the start of a sport. It was the birth of American competition itself. A moment of courage, curiosity, and camaraderie that forever changed the landscape of sport and spirit in the United States.